You have never been truly alone. Not once in your entire life. Someone has always been within earshot. A parent, a sibling, a neighbor through thin walls. For 99% of human history, this wasn't an accident. This was the entire point. Right now, you probably have a door you can close. A room with your name on it. Even if it's just a bedroom. You can lock a bathroom door and know, with total certainty, that no one will walk in. That certainty is new. It is one of the strangest luxuries modern life has ever handed you. And almost nobody thinks about it that way. For roughly 300,000 years, privacy as you understand it did not exist. Not because ancient humans didn't value it. Because the entire structure of survival made it impossible. Think about what a body needs to stay alive in the wild. Warmth, protection from predators, help carrying food, tending fires, watching children. None of that happens alone. A person by themselves, sleeping unguarded, away from the group, was not enjoying quiet time. They were prey. So people slept in piles. Literally. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years living among the Ohalo people of the Kalahari Desert, studying how small foraging bands organized daily life. He documented camps where a dozen or more people slept within a few feet of each other, around a single fire, inside a ring barely larger than a modern living room, bodies touching bodies for warmth, breathing in rhythm, no walls between anyone. Here's the term worth decoding, because it explains everything that follows. Anthropologists call this fission fusion social structure, which just means groups constantly split apart and merge back together depending on food, season, and conflict. You could walk away from your camp. You could not walk away from being seen. Wiessner, an anthropologist who spent decades studying the Ohalo, recorded something that reveals just how central this closeness was. She analyzed hundreds of hours of nighttime conversation around campfires and found that storytelling after dark wasn't idle chatter. It was how disputes got resolved, how gossip regulated behavior, how the whole camp stayed accountable to itself. Nobody's business was fully their own, because everybody's survival depended on everybody else knowing everybody else's business. Archaeological sites back this up in the layout of the structures themselves. At places like Ohalo II, a 23,000-year-old settlement on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, researchers found brush hut foundations packed tightly together, hearths shared between what would have been multiple families. There was no architecture for solitude. There was architecture for togetherness. Because togetherness was the technology that kept people alive. So let's reconstruct a night in that world. The sun is down. A fire crackles at the center of the camp. You are lying on packed earth. A woven mat beneath you if you're lucky. Someone's shoulder pressed against yours for warmth. A child cries somewhere to your left. An old man coughs. Someone else is still awake, murmuring a story about a hunt gone wrong 3 seasons ago. And everyone within range can hear it, correct it, laugh at it. You do not get up and shut a door. There is no door. There is only the fire, the dark beyond it, and the sound of other people breathing. Even the most intimate moments of human life happened in this shared space. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe, who studied the Hadza foragers of Tanzania, noted that even sex and childbirth among many foraging groups happened with only the thinnest social buffer. Not architectural privacy but negotiated discretion. People looked away. People pretended not to hear. Privacy wasn't a wall. It was a social agreement to not acknowledge what everyone technically knew was happening 3 feet away. Here's the counterintuitive twist. You'd assume more people crammed together means less privacy. Full stop. But foraging bands actually built something modern life quietly destroyed: privacy of information. Not privacy of space. Ancient humans had almost zero physical privacy and an enormous amount of psychological privacy. Because nobody was performing for an audience of strangers. Everyone in that camp had known you your entire life. There was no mask to maintain. No curated version of yourself to protect. You were fully seen. And because of that, you didn't have to hide. Compare that to your life now. You might live alone. You might have a locked door, a private phone, an entire apartment nobody else has a key to. And yet you likely spend hours a day performing for people who barely know you. Curating a version of your life for an audience that is, in the truest sense, a room full of total strangers. Researchers studying social media behavior have repeatedly found that this kind of performance for an unknown audience correlates with higher anxiety than living in full view of people who actually know you. Ancient humans had no walls and almost nothing to hide. You have walls on every side and somehow feel more exposed than they ever did. It gets stranger the further you push it. Anthropologist James Suzman, who has spent much of his career studying the Jew, Honski, and how foraging societies used time, has pointed out that solitude in these communities wasn't something people sought out for comfort. It was something reserved almost exclusively for punishment or ritual. Being alone meant you had done something wrong. Or you were undergoing an initiation. Or you were dying. Aloneness was not peace. Aloneness was exile. Now flip that. In your world, aloneness is often the goal. People pay extra for private rooms, private cars, private offices. Solitude has been rebranded from a warning sign into a luxury good. What used to signal danger now signals status. So when did this flip? Agriculture is usually the turning point historians point to. And for good reason. Once humans settled into permanent villages, families began building physical walls between households for the first time. Not for privacy in the emotional sense but to mark ownership of land. Grain stores, animals. The wall came first as a fence around property. Only centuries later did it become a boundary around the self. By the time actual doors with locks became common. In parts of Europe this was as late as the medieval period. The idea of a private inner life, thoughts and feelings that belong to you alone and to no one else, was still being invented. Historians of privacy note that the very concept of an individual right to solitude barely existed in written law before the 1800s. Which means the privacy you take for granted every single day is not ancient. It is one of the newest inventions in the entire history of your species. Younger than agriculture, younger than writing, younger than most religions. Your body and your instincts were built for a world with no doors at all. That's worth sitting with the next time you close one. The quiet you feel behind a locked door is not some deep ancestral comfort your brain evolved to crave. It's a modern habit layered thinly over 300,000 years of never once being unseen. Somewhere underneath that silence, a much older part of you is still listening for the fire. Still listening for the sound of other people breathing nearby. Still quietly checking that you are not, in fact, alone.